with Steve, there were a lot of things that we had in common, like where we grew up. And Steve used to play around Valhalla, the Sesmailspruit, which is now called
the Henops River.
Henops River.
But it's more. I think it should more be called Kakstrom, because it takes the whole of the Kurulini's sewage and directs it right through 3 quite nice golf courses.
No, it's wonderful stuff. Yeah, sure.
No, actually, it has a fungus in it. That stuff has a fungus in it, and Irene Country Club have just literally closed the course for 6 months because the floods in December came down, put cup all over the 12 of the greens, and it also washed their pump house away. So they couldn't spray the stuff off the greens, and it's killed everything.
Oh, dear.
So really Country Clubs needs people's support. And that's got nothing to do with this, but yeah.
If it's fungus, it's a mushroom farm.
Yeah, but you're going to eat it. You probably would. Okay. Steve, let's go from your bit of schooling in South Africa, and then you moved to Zambia. Let's go that route.
Okay, no, not that way at all. I was born there. I was born in a little place called Chingola in Zambia. My dad was involved in the mines, and then later in we lived out really far out in the bush. But my family had basically, my grandfather and my grandmother had moved up there straight after the war, after the Second World War. And she was a very, very, very British young lady when she met and married my grandfather in the 1930s. And his name was Johannes Stephanus Joubert. And his father was Royan Joubert. So I come from this whole. Royan Joubert was quite a prominent oak in the Anglo-Boer War. I think he ran faster than most oaks, particularly the second part of it. But he later became warden of Pretoria Central Prison. So I came out of that side. My grandfather got back from the war, very traumatized by the war, and he was a shaft sinker. Now, I've often wondered whether that was a trade, the shaft sinker, or whether that was his social personality. And maybe my grandmother then insisted that they go into the middle of absolutely nowhere, and that was then the copper belt was just coming about. And yeah, that's where I was born. And we came down to South Africa when I was 5.
From the book, there was an episode when you were leaving Zambia to come down here with the family and Peter Chibemba. Peter Chibemba was, I was born in Chingola Hospital. I mean, we're not talking about the Groote Schuur of the world there. It was a regional little hospital, but it must be quite reasonable. And in those days, I think when kids were born, the mothers stayed in hospital for about 2 weeks, typically, and the fathers weren't allowed close. There's no such thing as men in the delivery room. So my dad did what every other father did. There had been 2 daughters before me, and I then arrived, and his son had arrived, and it was a big thing for him. And so he did what every other father of a newborn son did there, and he went drinking for 3 days. And he coupled that with hunting. He was a hunter, and I mean, the first time I ever had beef was only after we came down to South Africa. We used to eat from the proceeds of the hunting. And my dad and his best friend was a guy called Buck Jones, and Peter Chibemba, who was the houseboy. They went off into the sticks to go and, I think it was to get some trophy animal to commemorate this great occasion of my birth. And all they did, they a hell of a lot of rounds later, both shot and drunken ones, and they arrived, decided that they had to get back. They never shot anything. They missed everything inside. And they decided they better get back to make my appointment. So they jumped into the Land Rover. My dad and Buck Jones were so out of their minds
that they sat on the roof while Peter Joubert, who didn't have a driver's license, drove this Land Rover, short wheelbase Land Rover back into town. And just outside Chigola town itself, they hit a goat in a village. And they pocketed the goat, and that was the trophy that they brought to the hospital. and I will tell you that my first memory was of my mother. They tried to get in the entrance of the hospital and they were chased away, obviously known certain terms and threatened with all kinds of things. So they made their silent way apparently around the hospital to the maternity section. The maternity section was on the first floor. I think there were only 2 floors, ground floor and first floor. And there they sang like the three tenors, at the tops of their voices at somewhere around about midnight. And I will tell you, my first memory is of my mother holding me in her arms, looking down over this balcony down at the three of them standing there with this bloody goat draped around the shoulders, I think it was, and singing, what was that song? Lay down your head, Tom Dooley. That's what they sing at the tops of their voices, and my mother laughing her head off. But Peter was, and I was handed to him literally the day I got home, and he kind of brought me up. My mom had managed to have 4 kids in 4 years and 3 in 23 months. Yeah, that didn't count the first pregnancy. So it wasn't that quick. But my and Peter, I mean, my mom's hands were very tied up with this lot, and I was handed to Peter, and he became my be all and end all. I mean, he wiped my bum, he fed me, he did the whole shooting match. And we finally, at the end of 1963, things were getting quite hairy up in that part of the world, and a number of our neighbours had been, we lived way out in the sticks on a farm, and a number of the neighbours had been attacked, and some really unsavoury incidents happened. And then a lot of the people came out of Belgian Congo, escaping from the whole spread of stuff that came down. And my folks then, my dad wanted to move, we wanted to go to Operation Noah.
Oh yeah,
on Lake Kariba.
Yeah.
My mother had no interest whatsoever in going to live in the bush again. So she hid all the papers. He found them, I think it was like 12 years later. But anyway, he was so angry with the authorities, the Rhodesian wildlife authorities at Kariba, that hadn't now got him. He had all this experience, and he wanted to go down there, and he wanted to rescue animals and blah, blah, and they didn't even bother to call him back. He was very dumb. So we came to South Africa, and the morning that we were then due to leave, we bought a brand new Opel Caravan station wagon thing. It was all packed to the rafters, 3 little kids. My one sister died a year before, and it was just me and my sister and my brother, and we were packed into this vehicle, and it was packed to the rafters, had a roof rack on, and there was Peter. Peter was standing, and he had a little suitcase in his hand, but remember those little brown cardboard, the wrinkles, those little ribs on it. He had one of those in his hand. It was that size. And he was a big guy. And he stood there holding this little suitcase in his fingers. And he said, "Where am I going to sit?" to my folks. And my folks said, "No, Peter, you're not going with us." And he said, No. You said the family is moving to South Africa. And my dad said, "But Peter, you can't go with us." He said, "But I paid. I'm going with the family." And they said, "Peter, you can't." And he said, my dad said, "You know how far it is? It's going to take us 3 days just to get there, Peter." He said, "If there's no place inside, I'll sit on the roof." And I can remember us finally just being piled into the car and driving off down the road, and there was Peter standing looking, and said this incredulous look on his face. And then he started to trot off like it's after us, running down this road, this little dirt road, and we were looking out the back. Well, I had kids looking out the back of the car. And we'd been down in South Africa living on a farm out just north of Pretoria for a good 6 or 7 months. And I was at school at a convent in Pretoria called Alouette Convent. And every afternoon I'd get home, and I'd go park myself off at the bottom of the farm. There was a road that went straight down to the Great North Road. There was no highways then, anything. And I would look down this road, And whenever anybody asked me what I was looking for, I was waiting for Peter. But he obviously never came. I don't know what happened to him.
Tragic, huh? Tragic of immigrating when you don't want to. Okay, let's go on with your schooling for your pilot selection.
Look, I grew up literally on the final approach of I think 01 or 03 at Swartkops. And so I had airplanes around me all the time. My dad got his PPL in the 1960s, 68, 69, so I flew with him quite often. And ever since I stopped wanting to be an ice cream boy, I wanted to be a pilot.
Why did you want to be an ice cream boy?
A person, a very august general, and probably the most prominent general, Air Force general in the past 50 years of the Air Force, General Bob Rogers.
No.
He chaired my selection board, my first selection board, and the second actually. And he asked that question: how long have you wanted to be a pilot? Now it's one of the standard questions in that kind of selection. It was very intimate. I don't know if you folks know about what those selection boards were like, but you're a little. I'm 17 years old, and you march into a sprung wooden floored room, and there's a plastic chair in there, and then there's this semicircle of probably, I don't know, 15, and the lowest rank I think is a colonel, and they sit there, and you come marching into this thing. And I came marching in, and I got my timing wrong, and I realized that the chair was one step too close to me. So I carried on marching because you only know how to hold on one foot, you see. And I booted this chair, I hit it with my knee, and it took off. And it hit straight for Bob Rogers, who was sitting in the middle, like this, heading straight. And I think I managed to grab the leg. I mean, with great dexterity, I mean, really. And then I grabbed the chair, fell over, bent down to pick it up, and we had those, those like Gestapo peak caps on. That's what we wore. We didn't have these funny little things on. And this bloody cap fell over off my head, and I bent down, put it on my head, and then I stood up. And when I stood up, the peak was doing this kind of thing. And now you taught to salute by touching. I was brand new little trippy, big brand new, and you taught to salute by touching the tip of your finger to the peak of your cap. Had I done that, it would have been. So I kind of got somewhere in between, and I saluted. And Bob Rogers said then, "Have you finished now?" He said, "Sit down." I sat down, and he said to me, "How long have you wanted to be a pilot?" And I thought, I made such a bad impression. I must make them laugh. So I said, ever since I stopped wanting to be an ice cream boy, sir. I said, an ice cream seller. I said, an ice cream seller. I said, you don't have much ambition. But I had read David Niven's book, The Moon's a Balloon. And David Niven placing Sandhurst, similar circumstance happened. So I said, when he said, you don't have much ambition, I said, on the contrary, General. He said, explain yourself. I said, don't get too comfortable in that chair, sir. And nobody laughed. They didn't even crack a smile, those folks. They didn't, they just got... And then he said, does anybody else have any questions? And some guy popped up from the side, how does a jet engine work? I said, the air comes in the front, gets compressed and heated and spit out the back. He said, that easy, I said. Yeah. He said, anything else? I said, you could go. I think it was the shortest selection board in history. And I got up and I saluted and with the cap properly on. And when I turned around, my blooming left sole hit one of the boards had come up a bit, and I hit it, and my ankle cracked. And I staggered from this thing, smashed my head outside. I was smashing it on a post. And this brigadier walked out after me. And he was the SANS brigadier. He was in charge of the whole psychological side of things. And he said to me, "What are you doing? Joubert, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh shit, brigadier, screw that one up, didn't I?" He said, "Stop hitting your head against that pole." He says, "Because otherwise you will not be able to start pubes course in April." And turned around and walked away. And I was the only oak that day to be told that I was going to go fly. In fact, I didn't believe it.
No, so that was your selection. How absolutely formal, delightful. There are quite a few guys here that were Air Force, went through that, but I don't remember kicking over a chair. I nearly kicked a bucket to a chair.
That's how they selected helicopter pilots.
Okay, you guys, you can take him outside and soften him up. Right. Then, with your training, just tell us how that worked, please.
Well, we did around about 125 hours on Harvards and then 125 hours on IPS. I flew the Spanny, just the most beautiful aeroplane, fixed wing toy to have, I think, and teacher. I think I hope anybody that gets the chance to fly a tail dragger does so, because that's when you learn to fly. I think I'm not my flying career didn't continue after I left the Air Force, but I do think that there's huge merit in that aeroplane. And then I went down onto IMPS, and I had about 12 hours of IMPS, and I went flying one day with a, I thought it was a bit of a cold, but it was actually a sinus reaction too. I was allergic to some stuff, and we were doing max rate descents at Longyearbyen, yeah, doing I think it was a Mach run, about 12 hours to start solo. You do that, and as we came through. On the descent, very high rate of descent, I think you're probably descending at about 12,000 feet a minute or something, and it's unpressurized. And there was just this pain in my ears, and then it just grew, and then my whole head seemed to explode. And that got a very unpleasant kind of story. Ended up with me spending about 4 months at training command in Pretoria, and then somebody said, "Look. We want you to continue, but you can't." I'm sorry, I went back to Longyearbyen to do a test. I had an op and stuff on my nose, and I went back to Longyearbyen. We tested it, whether I was okay, and on the descent again, the same thing happened. So they then said to me, "Well, go back to Dunno's and finish on Harvards." And I had the incredible privilege of flying another 120 odd hours and clove up my wings at Donato with some of the real characters, the real character instructors.
Absolutely lovely. But the problem that you had with the sinus and that, which said that was the end for you.
Well, I did. That's what I believed. I thought that was the end of my flying career. Yeah.
The alternative was that they spent a lot of money on you.
Yeah, they spent a hell of a lot of money on pilots in those days. I think in those days even it was well over R1 million to train a SAAF pilot to wings. And wings, you knew absolutely nothing. When you got your wings, you still had a long way to go before you were a useful pilot.
Yeah. And from that you were sent on to rotary wing machines.
Yeah, we got. You were given an option, and three things. You kind of opted for which direction you wanted to go in, and there were 4 options, I think: light aircraft, jets, choppers, or transport aircraft.
I just missed a beat there that you became Stasi Slet.
That was after I got my wings.
Yeah.
At Dunno's, I stayed
Can you
there.
explain what that was?
Stasi Slet was, our primary role was we were the scribes. We used to come here to Rand. Fields Aviation, and we used to do all the Harvard servicing. and then they do the major servicing here, and then you'd come along with a slightly more experienced oak than you. And the Stasi Slet's job was to scribe all the, go through the whole checklist of everything with the test flight, yeah. And it also allowed one to get up to a fair amount of mischief. Yes.
But you were Stasi Slet at SWAT groups, not so?
No.
Donner's at least. Okay. Right, and now, so now we're moving around on to some of the things that happened there, like the Wednesday 10-pin bowling, similar.
Yeah. The 10-pin bowling was it was an AWOL issue, and that was what before I qualified. It was my second phase on Harvard's, and there were only two of us on the course. A guy called Brian King. I don't know what happened to Brian King. I thought he may have gone to CAA at one point. But a guy called Brian King and I were the only two guys on the second phase doing a wings kind of phase on Harvard's, and I would AWOL every Wednesday, and I'd shoot off to Pretoria and do what most young oaks did. And I ended up one night trying to get away from a bit of a limpet. She was a bit of a limpet. So and we ended up at the Pretoria at the bowling alley, the Kingsley Centre 10-pin bowling alley. And there was a team, they were playing league, and there was a team that was looking for a fifth player. It was 5-man teams, and these were hairdressers. There were 2 girls and 2 chaps. The 2 chaps liked each other, and the 2 girls were gorgeous. And I managed to park the limpet and go and play 10-pin bowling. And so they asked me to come back the next week and play for them. So I AWOL the next week and the next week. And about the 3rd or the 4th Thursday morning, I was flying with my instructor, Denzel White. So you may know, very, very smooth man, chap, a very, very nice guy. And Denzel said to me, Joubert, he used to say we were on first name terms. I called him Major, he called me Joubert. and he said, Joubert, he said, every Thursday morning lately you fly like an absolute expletive deleted. And he said, what happens on Wednesday nights? And I think he's probably the only instructor I ever had that I actually could tell the truth to. So I told him. And he said, and I, by this stage, got involved with one of the hairdressing girls. And which is why I was going back. In my 10-pin bowling. Anyway, he said to me, what do you do on Wednesday night? So I thought, I'm going to tell you. So I said, I want to go to Pretoria and I go play 10-pin bowling. And he said, you go bowling? Is that the attraction? Why you fly? So I said, well, actually, there's some very nice team members. And he said, will you bring her to a do here? I said, yes. He said, okay. Mic went off. But 30 seconds, we were on a long nap. But 30 seconds later, he came and he said, Joubert? I said, Major? He said, in future, sleep in on Thursday mornings, we will fly on Thursday afternoons. We were flying along one day in an aircraft, this is Denzel, and he didn't say much, but he was very smooth and very quiet. And he said, his mic clicked on and he said, Joubert, Major, he said, when you get married one day, I said, yes, Major. He said, for God's sake, marry for money.
Oh, wise man. Right, and then we move on to your LO, or your helicopter training.
Yeah.
You qualify now.
Oh yeah, no, I know everything now. I got 200, well, in fact, the Stasi Select part of things gave me probably another 100 hours, which had a major impact later. But I went to Bloom with maybe 350 odd hours, and I knew everything. I could fly an airplane. I knew if you pulled the stick back.
Houses get smaller.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I knew these things. So why? And Hugh Strayer was my instructor. And he, first, obviously you do the ground school side, and that's your first sortie out with an Alouette. And he took me off to the east of Air Force Base Bloemspruit. What's an airport called now?
Bloemspruit, yeah.
Well, Bloemfontein Airport. Our general flying area was to the east of
JVM Hadsock in those days.
Correct, yeah. And he took me out to about 30 k's, 15, 20, 30 k's out to the east of that, and there was a dirty great field. It was huge. It must have been 500 meters that way, 500 meters that and it had a bloody cattle fence around it. And he put me in the centre of the field, and he brought the car into the Honda, and he said to me, "Okay, you ready?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You have control. Just keep it in this spot. Just keep it here." And I went, God, this is bloody insulting. And he said, "You have control." I said, "I've got it." And the flipping aeroplane just shot off to the side, and I'm trying to bring it back, and it shot off. And then he said, "I've got it," because we were going to prank big time. And I was absolutely poop scared that this thing was so sensitive. But finally, I mean, when you get to fly them, and you get to fly them properly, you could take your fingers like that. You put the stick in your fingers, and everything you need to do in an Alouette, you can do without touching your fingers with the stick.
I'll believe you.
You can't do that with a 747. So.
I try to fly the Aries and the 3. But the first time, your reaction to this amazing machine, banging your head, or you were so discombobulated, discouraged.
Yeah. Well, I wondered how the hell you ever flew this thing, and you ever would be able to fly it. But I mean, you get the hang of it quite quickly. You know, it's still. I mean, it's an absolute bitch of a thing to fly if you want to fly academically. You want to fly an academic circuit and nice rates of climb and decent rates of turn and stuff.
Is it like that, Rob? No.
No. What is it? Does it fly dead straight and?
It does as you please. You think what you need to do, and the aircraft follows your thoughts.
That I'd agree with, but I haven't flown them for a long time.
Yeah, no, lovely. I really enjoyed that. But you said that you thought you would never, ever be able to master this monster. No. Never.
No, I didn't.
Okay. But you mastered it after a fashion, and you were transferred to 95 TAU.
Okay, yeah.
Your hours. And
Well, the way it worked then, and that's where this extra 100 hours that I got as a
and
Stasi
also
Select
the
came.
mountain flying.
Yeah, no, we did the mountain flying is the greatest. I think one of the very few people that had the privilege of having taken a chopper to the tops of literally every peak in the Drakensberg, and had this amazing time, but then gone back 35 years, 40 years later, and climbed every one of those peaks. The back of my back.
Why would you do that?
Because stayed there.
Yeah.
Because
It
stayed
must be absolutely beautiful going back again.
doing it that way was something else. But what happened was that we did the chopper course, and that was, again, probably about 120 hours, if I remember correctly. And then it was a 25-hour Puma conversion. And we were going to sit as ballast as co-pilots on Pumas for 2 years. And I was not hugely a great fan of doing that. I wanted commander hours. So I finished my final test on Pumas and got my result, and I walked straight in. Munster Wilkins was the 19th Squadron boss, and the conversion school boss at Swatties, and I went to him and I said, I want to go to 17. And he said, I beg your pardon. I said, I want to go to 17. He said, do you want to fly Alouettes? I said, yeah. He said, but you just qualified on a Puma. It's a twin-engine, hugely sophisticated aircraft compared to Alouette. Well, are you mad? I said, yeah. I want to fly Alouettes. He said, why? I said, I want commander. I said, I don't want to sit as a co-pilot. And so he ended up phoning Andre Becker, who was the 17th Squadron OC. And Andre said, come up. But if you want to fly, you come now. So I grabbed my helmet and my flying bag and off I went. And he said, it was Monday, Monday afternoon. And he said, you do a check with a squadron instructor now. You do our OTC now. And if you pass it, you can stay. So I said, okay. And I went to the kite and I sat in there. And I hadn't flown it for 3 or 4 months, I think, at that stage. And so I sat and I familiarised myself with it. I walked a guy called Tuki Sneyman, who was the squadron instructor. And he put me through my paces. He chopped the flipping fuel flow on the Alouette 27 times in the next hour and a half. Yeah. 27 times that I did that. And I managed not to crash the aeroplane.
A masochist.
Yeah. And I got back in and he said, do you want to be on the squadron? I said, yeah. And he said, there's one condition. I said, what's that? He said, you've got to the bush tomorrow morning. So at 7 o'clock the following morning, I took off and I went to Ondangs. And I arrived on Ondangs, was in those days still called 95 TAU, Tactical Air Force Unit. And I think it was, the date, the 2nd of November, 1979, I think, or 78, I can't remember. 79 is the day I arrived. And I had, when I landed there, I had 499.25 hours. And the requirement was you needed 500 hours. You need 500 hours to get the badge, get the ops badge and the kind of operation cleared pilot. And when I landed, Basil Newman, who was the boss there, Major Basil Newman, he met me at the aircraft, and I had my helmet in a bag, and I still had my kind of half blues on. And he met me at the aircraft and he said, come with me. He said, can you find your bag in a big cargo netted pole with all the baggage for passengers? Was I put it out, and they got it out. And I thought, I wonder what's going on here. And he said, I understand you've got 499.25 hours. I said, yeah. He said, you're going to get into an LO and you're going to give top cover to the flossy that just brought you in for 3/4 of an hour. And I didn't. When I landed, they gave me my badge.
Just to go backtrack slightly there, on your mountain flying, there's 2 guys here that knew and he was a puke with us, Russell Tungay. That was now the Drakensberg Boys Choir School.
Yeah.
But that's where you did your mountain flying.
Well, there was an ex-SAAF guy called James Sklanders, Major James Sklanders, I think. And James had a place called Kelvin Grove.
Okay.
I think it was a holiday resort kind of place, but that's where I think it was 87 at AFS, Advanced Flying School. The chopper school would go there for the mountain flying phase towards the end of your time.
Okay.
And we went there, and then you finish that, you go to Durban for a weekend. What a weekend. And then fly back on the Monday, and then you'd start your final checks. He was an instructor, I don't know if any of you guys have ever come across him, a chap by the name of Major Claes Klaassen at the Big Braai, a Mulder Braai. And my final test on Alouettes, it's quite a long test, but 2.5 hours on Alouette. And I got stuck at the nurses' res at Free State University the night before.
Limpets all over.
I don't know how I got stuck there. I only got out of there at about 5:45 in the morning, and we were taking my test was scheduled for 7 o'clock. And I got back, I had a shower, and I rushed off to the aircraft, but I was not really in a fit state to fly at all. But it was my final test. And the first part of it, I think the first hour was a 3-leg nav. And it was raining. It was like drizzly, low cloud. All the tops of the hills were covered. We were flying through the valleys and stuff. And the wind was blowing. And I thought the wind was blowing from the left. And so I thought I must fly a little bit into wind, turn into wind. It would push us. And I had a map in front of me, but you may as well give me a blank piece of paper for all I could see. And then I thought, after a while, maybe I recognised 2 hills, and there were 2 hills on the map somewhere, so I turned a little bit more left. And then a little while later, I think I turned a little bit more left. And Klaes Klaassen just sat there like this. And we finally came through a little valley, and there was a town in front of us where no town should have been. and he looked at me and went, "Do you recognize this place, Karl?" Everybody was Karl. "Do you recognize this place, Karl?" So I said, "I do." And he said, "Then tell me what it is." And I said, "I think it is." He said, "It's Brandfort." He says, "On a 45-mile lane, you are only 18 miles off course." I managed to do the next 2 legs okay, and then the rest of the test was fine. I had to come back the next day and do another leg, and then they said that I could go and fly, go to Pumas.
The navigation difficulties, well, that was it. But I think very few people nowadays understand what the difficulties with navigation were, where you had a compass and a map.
You had a map, yeah.
And up in the border area, flat as a pancake.
The ground level varies 14 feet between Mapacha and Rokana. I don't know if anybody knows that. It's a distance of about 780 nautical miles. The ground level varies 14 feet. I mean, we're talking flat. And you've got, in the Ovamberland's got a lot of, it's called Pannetjiesveld. It's got a lot of these, we call them shonners. They like salt pans. In the dry months, they don't have water in them. And in wet months, they've got mosquitoes. and you know, navigation was quite a challenge. There was no such things. There's no you know, not even things like ADF. Obviously, there's no GPS at all. So typically, what we would do, you would have strip maps. Depending on where you were, you would cut maps in strips about that wide, and then you'd fold them. And you had a pad on your overall where you could stick the maps into it, and then you flip the things over as you were going along the track. But mainly a hell of a lot was just dead reckoning, and a little bit of. I was flying. There was I called Lemon van Graan. We called him Lemon van. He was Colonel van Graan. He was the OC of sector, I think 20, which was kind of Inanna to the east of Inanna, not all the way to Rundu, but I think to Nkongo past that. And from Inanna to Nkongo was exactly, I think, about an hour's flight. And it was like nothing. You'd keep the road called the Chandelier to your right, and you'd keep the cut line, the border, to your left. And they were about 5 kilometres apart. And as long as you stayed in that thing, if you flew frequently enough, as long as you stayed in that, you could find where you were going to. And you've got all the military bases would have an antenna somewhere. And this Lemon van Graan he was such a pain in the ass. We called him Lemon because a lemon is a wild goose chase. And he was forever calling us out because there were big groups of this bunch of tours, that bunch of tours, and we were called out to come and sort the oaks out. And we get there and there was nothing. And I just spent days chasing after these things, so we called him Lemon van Graan. And he got to hear what the name was. So we would rub it in a little bit, but coming to Inanna to come and land. And then you call on the radio the Inanna ops room where you knew he was sitting. And we go, Fruit fly 1 and 2 turning finals for City Stop. And the steam would come in. Anyway, I'm taking one day from Nana to, I was taking from Nana to Nkonga. And the wind was coming into us, a little bit of a headwind. We're going to be probably 2 or 3 minutes late. And he started to panic, and he asked for my map. And he had this map, this strip map, and he was turning it, and he was trying to find out where position was. And I said to him, no, we're going to be about 2 minutes late, and the wind's coming a little bit from the left, so I'm going to turn probably 2 or 3 degrees in, but let me just check what it is. Took my glove off and I went, and I stuck my hand out of the window into the airflow. And I went, oh no, the wind's coming, it's about 5. So I turned a little bit in, and I said, we should be there in 2 minutes. I knew it was 2 minutes because I could see the top of the tower sticking out. I thought I was a
Maurice is your first.
Thank you very much.
I've got here your sensory overload after your first op.
I think there's a distinction between the first contact and the first op. The first contact I think I'd been there 2 or 3 days, and I was obviously as grass green as could be, and I was flying behind a guy. Many of you will name a guy called Boats Ulafir. He still flies choppers today. I think he's in China flying them now. And Boats he was far more experienced than I was, and he had the only map this particular day, and the maps then ended about 10 kilometers north of the border is where the map ended, and then we had a Portuguese hand-drawn thing that was photocopied. So they weren't murder accurate. Okay? But we were not worried because we were flying up just east of the Kanini River. The Kanini River comes almost due south down to Ruakana, where it turns kind of 90 degrees to the right and becomes the border from then on. But from that point all the way to almost to Rundu, where the Kavango River comes in, that is all a cut line. Okay, so we had crossed the border and we were going to go give top cover to. They were going to do a troop drop, and they were going to do this troop drop at what looked like a big intersection. So Boats and I didn't say much because I didn't know what we were doing. And Boats said, what we're going to do, it was about 40 minutes or something, that we had to fly up this road, and the road was just to the east of the Kanini River, which is coming south, so just to the east of it, and we were going almost due north, up along this road, and we'd get to this bloody intersection. And that's where we would make sure that nobody's going to shoot the Pumas down, and then call the Pumas in and they come and drop their troops. It sounded like all of fun. And we flew, and we were waiting for the intersection. Boats had the map, and I was just sitting at the back following him. And we flew, and I knew that it was 37 minutes or something to that point. And I think 37 minutes came and went, and we didn't pitch yet. And we carried on another minute, and maybe another 2 minutes, and then I started to get nervous, I said, Boats. And he said, no, we're not there yet. We've got a bit of a headwind. And look, we can't miss the crossroads. And we were still cruising along, and then Boats started to pitch. And I thought, well, we must be getting close. He was pitching because you don't find out where he was. And then the Pumas, Yanni van der Merwe was flying a Puma. He said, Oaks, we're at the drop zone, and we can't see you. We don't know where you are, but you know you're not here. And at that moment, it was like this incredible, it happened a few times in the bush, but this big thing grabbed me in the guts. And I just said, get out of here, turn, get out, go. And I said, Boats, we've got to turn around. And he said, we're not there yet. I said, Boats, we've got to turn around. We've got to turn around. And I started to turn. And he then turned with me. And as we did that, the ship we were almost over town. It was to be taken later, I think in Opspotia they took it. It was, in those days, called Villa Rosadas. Later it was called Zangonga. But it was a very, very heavily fortified anti-aircraft guns, all that. And everything just opened up. But we were turning. And we kind of scoffed and got out of there. And I remember just staying below the level of the bushes, not even the trees. And down to Ruakana, where we refueled and went straight back to Ondangs. And we never said anything. There was no Well, that was a close one. There was no debrief.
There was no protection for the Pumas that you were supposed to...
No, the Pumas decided to drop. And what had happened, what had caused this is that obviously the north-south road was quite well used, but the east-west road that was supposed to form this intersection, these maps had been drawn like 60 years before, and it was a well-known wagon train in those days, but it was a road that had become totally unused, so it all overrode. And so there was no intersection.
Wow.
And so we missed it completely out.
Wow. Steve, you were... I've got an incident here of Roger's strike with your... You weren't allowed to discuss what you had done on ops, even with your colleagues, when you got back, in the cooker bars or whatever they were in those days. And some of your guys were talking about the Wanilla DC4.
That happened on Pube's course. Roger was on Pube's course with me. And we had an old sergeant major, it was on Pube's, still on Spanish, on Harvard's, by the way. And we were having a fuel lecture by an dear old man who ran, the old sergeant major who ran the Bowser at Dunno's. And he was trying to make the point that the pilot is responsible for the fuel that goes into his tanks. And he was trying to make the point, you've got to test your fuel, it's your responsibility, blah, blah, blah. And then he turned around and he said, and we can all remember the recent incident, happened about 2 years before that. We can remember that recent incident where that DC-4 up in Francistown, in Botswana, took off, and the pilot had not detected that there was Avtur in the tanks had been filled with Avtur. And it killed him and 64 other people on board. Only survivor was the engineer.
The airplane would run on paraffin. It would run at very low power, but missing, coughing, and farting.
No. What happened was, the way I understood it, was that Avtur is slightly lighter than avgas. So the avgas was at the bottom of the tanks. They did a full pre-flight that morning, very early in the morning, and they'd landed the previous afternoon. 2 kites had landed there, 2 DC-4s had landed. One was being flown by, I asked you about him the other day, Andy Robisky was flying the one, and he had still, I think he was still about 70% full. But I think that what was his name?
Strike.
Jeff Strike? No, that was the other. Anyway, Roger's dad, his kite was quite low on juice, and they said to the fuel pump guy there, the fuel manager, they said, to fill it up. They were flying to Malawi with Malawian mine workers the next day. That was Wanilla's kind of job. And unbeknown to them, the fuel dump manager had been selling avgas to his mates. And BP had notified him that they're coming up to do an audit. And he had far more Avtur than he needed and too little avgas. He was going to get caught. So these 2 big aeroplanes came in and he then pumped them full of Avtur. And I think Andy got airborne first. He was about 20 minutes before them, and he had no problems until he got to about 10 or 12,000 feet, and then they started running very rough. But in the meantime, I think it was Jeff Strike. I think Jeff, they did fuel checks in the morning, but they drained avgas from the bottom of the tanks. And it showed up in the test that it was fine. No water, no nothing, that's what they were looking for. And they got airborne, and they were barely, I think they were going through about 300 or 400 feet, and all 4 engines burst into flame. And they then tried to turn and come back, but they hit the deck about a kilometre short. And everybody on board, excepting for the flight engineer, was killed. And so this Sergeant Major now was telling us the story about check your fuel, and he decided to use this to drive home the point. And he said, and that commander of that aircraft didn't check his fuel, and it killed he and 64 other people. And there was only one survivor. And Roger put his hand, he said, Sergeant Major, that's not true. The commander of the aircraft, the crew of that aircraft were exonerated. They had nothing to do with it. He said, no, my boy, it was the commander's fault, because the commander of that bloody aircraft was supposed to check his fuel and didn't. He said, incorrect, the Board of Inquiry, what you said, the Board of Inquiry, sir, said very clearly that they went through all the checks and there was no ways that they could have found out what was going on. That was found by the Board of Inquiry, and then Sergeant Major got exasperated. He turned to him, he said to him, man, I'm telling you it was the pilot's fault. Who are you to tell me it wasn't? And Roger said, the pilot was my father. So I'm not sorry for that old man. He absolutely collapsed into a little more. He really, he must have
absolutely. James Steve Rybitsky was his dad in the other one. Okay. Now, you had been on a lot of ops into Angola, and you guys were getting a little stressed, to say the least. And you got a new RSM arrived on the scene.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think it may have been Ops Protea. It was an extensive one, 1981, I think it was. And it went on for a few weeks, and it was a very intense affair, and we had very little time, if any at all, off. I think we spent some time in Ongiba, which previously was called Pereira de Esch, and we spent time there, and there was a lot of fighting, a lot of stuff that was going on, and it was the other side wasn't playing anymore. You know, maybe 79 into 80, it was not as intense, but then it escalated. The war escalated through 1980 like it was going out of fashion. And yeah, we ended up getting back to Andangs after this ops finished, and we were shattered. The oaks were finished, and we were all in the pub having an absolute hoolie, and a chap came and announced himself as the new RSM at Ondangwa Air Force Base. And ironically, he had been my RSM at Ellis Russ when I was there before I went flying. And his name was, he was a flight sergeant Snowman, and he'd just been promoted to warrant officer second class Snowman. And he came and told us at the pub, but there was a lot of gin that was happening, and there was a lot of stuff that was going on, and he came and told us that he was going to have inspection in the officers' quarters the next day, because the RSM was allowed to do that, as long as he was respectful. Those are probably contradictory terms. Anyway, at 7 o'clock the next morning, and you're going to have to excuse my language on this, but I have to tell you what happened. At 7 o'clock the next morning, we were all really having the first relax we'd had for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the next thing there was this, and this foot came down in that almighty halt outside, and this voice that like thunder, and woke people up in Grootfontein. And this I went, officers, well, in Afrikaans, officer, and there was just, all with one voice, 14 LO and Puma crews, pilots went, fuck off! And we went, I am the RSM, and I can hold an inspection, and I gave you notice last night that I was going to come and hold an inspection this morning. Officer, fuck off! We all see again. And then Arthur Walker shouts at the icon and says, I have a bullet here with your name on it. If you don't fuck off, you're going to die. So he goes storming off, and he rushes into Basil Hume. He's like, I see the base. And he rushes in and he says, Major! Now, how do we know this? A guy called Aki's Penzorn was the edge, and he told us. And he says that he said, Major! He said, the chopper pilots, they just told me to fuck off. So Basil says to him, why? He says, well, I told them in the office, in the mess last night, I told them I was going to hold the inspection this morning. And they told me to fuck off, and the one thing is going to kill me. Basil says, you went to hold inspection, the chopper pilots, the officers this morning, you went to whole inspection there? Yes. He says, Sergeant Major, if you ever attempt to hold an inspection of my helicopter pilots after all the shit that they've been through on their first rest day for weeks, I will fucking kill you myself.
Just after that, you had an incident you told me about, a departure with high density altitude at Nkonga.
A guy called Barnos, who later became Chief of the Army. I had to go pick him up. No, it was, not even after that, it was, I'd been in the bush, I think two days. And I arrived on a Thursday, this must have been the Sunday. And I was tasked to fly out to Nkonga, which was about an hour away from on games, and go pick up this, I think then he was a colonel, but called Barnos, and his sidekick. And fly them, I think I'd take them to Inanna. And I went cruising on my little Allo, and I had a very big flight engineer. They'd given me the kind of the best of the best that ever was, a guy called Flip Pretorius. But he was a big fella. And we got to Nkonga, and I loaded these two outside. It was only 43 degrees outside. and I loaded them into the aircraft, and most of those bases they were called revetments. They were about 5 meters high. There was these earthen and concrete walls all around the base, and there would be a gap in it if there was a runway, and you could kind of taxi out through the gap and go and take off like a normal aeroplane. But these revetments were there to protect everybody and aircraft that were in there as well from I suppose, prying eyes or anybody trying to throw anything but a mortar on you. And I landed, and I loaded it up, told him how long it was going to take us to reach Nkonga, and started up and said to Flip, let's go. And buggered this taxiing out there like an aeroplane. Hover takeoff, let's go. And I got it up into the hover. And I thought, using a little bit more power than I'm used to, but it's a little bit hot. It's all right. I trading kicked in, you see. And I pushed a stick forward, and we started to go. And the transition never came. And the war did. And the war got closer and closer and closer, and the flipping thing, the only thing that was changing was the expression on my face. And at the last possible moment, I kicked a huge amount of right rudder in, and I swept his tail around, and I dumped it back onto the ground. And there was dead silence, and then Flip said, "Lut, I think we should taxi through the gap and take off like a normal aeroplane."
Would you just give us an idea of the troops are going in, and you are just doing a gunship in your anti-clockwise circle?
Okay, well, typically the way an ops would happen, a target obviously would have been identified by the oaks and checked out, and generally speaking, we would gather at wherever the launching point for the ops was. We would be there by about 5 o'clock in the morning, and at roughly between 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, one of the recce groups would have gone to recce the camp. We worked a lot with guys like 32 Battalion. They had one of the most amazing recce guys, a chap called Willem Rotta. Willem was just, he at one stage, I mean, he'd go into camps and steal everybody's ID cards from the bad oaks, that kind of thing. But they would report normally at about 4:30 in the morning, how many people there were in the camp, what weaponry there was, and all that kind of thing. Okay. We then all get ready, and then we'd start our run, and the Imp and the Mirage guys, or the Buck guys, or the Cadbury guys would come in, and they would throw whatever bombs they were going to throw on the place. And our job essentially as allies, as gunships, we had a 20mm cannon sticking out the door. Our job was really to take out the remaining anti-aircraft fire, and to take out the resistance essentially that was on the ground, and make it safe for the Pumas to land the troops that would then sweep through the place. Yeah, so we would see on the running, you would normally, you could see the strikes going in from the jets. And then we get there, and sometimes there was, and we're going to, always into a left-hand orbit because the gun's up the left-hand side. And we'd pitch to your guns were kind of zeroed in at between 600 and 800 feet above the ground. And a good flight engineer would, whatever the target was, he would 1 or 2 shot burst, he'd go, doosh, and then he would adjust, and the next thing, whatever was there was gone.
You mentioned that you'd have 3 shots on 1 explosive.
Yeah, we generally, you'd sit with your engineer when you got up to the bush, and he would load according to your own preference. I like to go 3 ball rounds and an HE, high explosive round. But that was my choice. Some of the guys went, more ball and others more HE. The HE could set things alight as well. Acted as a bit of an incendiary as well.
Okay. Now, you were coming back from one of the ops and you saw a green tanker.
Yeah. With that same Zangongo, in placed, in fact, just a little bit further north of where we'd missed the target kind of a year or so before. We'd given a top cover to the oaks there. And the Pews were obviously a hell of a lot faster than us. So they'd all turned around and they dropped their troops and they were gone. And we then descended down and I decided, let's go down the Kaneni River. Cruising down the Kaneni. And we were going down low level in the Kaneni. And just because it was different rather than... And on the left-hand side, the eastern bank of the river, this road was wide. I mean, it could be at places 100 meters wide because they would make new tracks all the time. It's all soft sand and mud and crap in the rainy season. And I think I could literally, if he had a hand throttle in something like I don't know what their trucks were called, he could probably set the thing, an hour before and then have it snooze while this thing cruised down in the ruts of the road all the way down. And anyway, we were like chilling down in the river and looking at little sights in the Kaneni River, and I saw up ahead of me, I could see this cloud of dust. It wasn't rainy season, it was the classics. See this cloud of dust. Shit, wonder what that is. Vehicle, obviously. And so we weren't supposed to do that kind of crap. We flew closer to have a look. And at a point, kind of lifted, my wingman was behind me, probably 100 meters or so behind me. And we just lifted, just got our level above the bank of the river, and we looked. And here was this green tanker traveling down the road. And there was only one occupant. The driver was in there, and he was battling this gas or whatever truck it was. And at a point, he turned and he looked at us, but in the same movement that he turned and he looked and he saw these 2 choppers, he opened the door and jumped up. and he flew through the air like that. He hit the ground and just went like a dust, and he was gone. And the vehicle carried on going down the road. Well, that looks like a target. and so we pulled back maybe, I don't know, maybe 50 meters over the river and said, let's hammer this thing. And we fired kind of together, and I remember that the 2 rounds from us hitting this vehicle in the tanker part of it, and it hit these 2 kind of gaps opening up, and this fluid started to pour out. And I thought, shit, it's just water. So hit it again, and flip. And it must have been HE, the first 2 must have been ball, and then the HE hit this thing. And this explosion was just unbelievable. It had 2 hatches on the top. And these 2, I remember seeing these 2 steel hatches just blast off and go as high as I could see. They kind of disappeared, and they were followed by this incredible, this light blue, unbelievably bright flame, 2 columns of it, straight up in the sky. you know, and we got hit by, you know, obviously the percussion from the explosion hit. And we dived into that river and just flew. So then we turned west and we flew away from this thing as fast as we could. And finally, man, we must have flown for a good 20 minutes before we turned south again, crossed the Rokana, across the Kalini River, came back to Rokana. We got back to Rokana. The entire camp was out on the revetments with glasses, and they would have been internally. And then in the distance, you could see this pool of black smoke going up. And we landed, nonchalantly walked up. What are you looking at? And they said, "Did Joe's just come out of there? There was a bit of an explosion about half an hour ago." No, we've been out in the west, you know. And about 4 days later, in the briefing or debriefing, we had not reported this thing at all. We thought we'd get in trouble, you know. We had not reported it I turned to the other, Brian, and myself, and he said, "Well done on hitting that tanker the other day." He said, "Well done hitting the tanker the other day." I said, "How do you know we hit the tanker?" He said, "We called intelligence, you know." But that same road is a story, I got to tell you this. It did not enable me to some Pongos, the army notes. But it was an event, something like that, where these people were standing on the revetments at Rokana, which had landed and refueled. And again, Flip Pretorius was my flight engineer, just a wonderful guy. And he's dead now. And Flip and I decided to pull this trip. So I got into the kite, we were ready to go. Now you've got all these trippies standing around on these revetments looking at this chopper. Oh, let me see the chopper. And I got it, strapped myself in, and I switched everything on, and I went to the starter switch, and I hit it. Boom, boom, boom. Flap! Yes, when you refuel, did you bloody well switch the mains off? The main switch off. He said, "No, yeah, I'm sorry, Lieutenant, I didn't." I said, "You've run the fucking battery down." I said, "I can't start this flipping thing. I can't stop." Yes, it's Flip, man. How many times I shit all over him? It's part of the whole reason was to shit all over him. It really made me look like a complete burp. So he goes, "Oh, man, I'm sorry." I said, "What are we going to do now?" He says, "Push start." So I say, "Well, get the oaks organised. Let's push start." So he says to the trippies, "I need about 10 of you oaks, please, come down and help me to push start." Those oaks come down, that was. And they come down and they push start this chopper across the hard stand, and you get some speed up, and then you up with a brake, you pull the brake up and hit the starter switch. So the wheels go, you pull the brake up and let it off. So now, I can only imagine that those oaks then went home afterwards, and they had these mothers, these lovely Free State farming mothers, they were proud of their son had gone to defended for Falcon, Fatherland, the whole works. And he comes home and they say, "What did you do in the bush, my boy?" And he said, "Ma, let me tell you, we pushed start the helicopter." And you could just see the old lady, and she loses all hope.
Well said. Just before we go, we have a break here. Steve emphasized to me about the glories of war. Or the non-glories of war.
Don't use those two words.
Yeah, okay, well they don't fit in, that's inappropriate. But your sentiment about war and what it actually means to those who've never been exposed to it.
I don't think I could write 1,000 books, and I think one could read 1,000 books, and one could listen to 1,000 guys try to tell you what their experiences were and stuff. But I don't think one can ever really, words can ever encapsulate what it's actually like. And I see these days, lots of political rhetoric going around the place, and folks seeming to hanker after war. They are out of their minds. There's nothing laudable about it. You see men at their very, very best, and you see at their very, very worst. But I was, I often say I came from the most loving, beautiful upbringing and environment. I had a beautiful, loving family. I had friends that are really, and we had such a lack of life growing up. And I was 17 when I went into the Air Force. And I was 20 when I arrived in Ordains for my first bush tour. The first real shock, I mean, we've spoken about the incident with boats and us almost flying into all that crap. But the first real shock was coming across a landmine, or the aftermath of a landmine, and it was a little civilian bucky that had detonated a landmine. And it is such a shock it was such a shock to me from, maybe particularly because of the environment I came out of. But it was just this vicious, violent eruption of just terrible shit. And about 3 or 4 days later, after that initial shock, is when, because it's so flat up there, and a landmine explosion goes off, you can see it. You can see it from 20, 30 kilometers away. And we were flying out to the west from Ordains, and I saw that 3 or 4 days after the initial one, which was on a road called Untitled, where a civvy bucky had detonated a landmine, and about 15 people on the back of the bucky were obliterated. But on this, 3 or 4 days later, flying along, and I saw this. It looks like a fir tree, like a cypress tree, really tall cypress tree, suddenly grows up there on the horizon. You can see this thing, and it's black, grey black smoke. And you know that it's a landmine. Get there, because somebody's got hurt. And we got there, and it was a biffle, which was a troop carrier, and it was lying on its side, and around it there were 15 chaps writhing in the sand. They were very badly hurt, and they were writhing in the sand, and they'd obviously detonated. They'd actually detonated triple cheese mine. Cheese mines are bloody things like this. And so I immediately got on the radio and to the nearest army base, and I said, I'm overhead, a landmine here, it's a biffle. These guys heard, get Kazakhstan here now. We'll stay here because, there was also fear that the Oaks would come and sort everybody on the ground. Then they radioed from the base again, and they said, how can you identify any of the people down here? I said, what do you mean identify? They said, are they white guys or black guys? I said, what does that matter? They are guys. Get the Kazakhstan. They said, no, we're getting Kazakhstan. But are they white guys or black guys? I said, they're white guys. And there was silence, and then the guy came, he said, please confirm that they're white guys. I said, what the fuck? You get the money, man. I said, what? Of course they're white guys. I'm looking at them, they're white guys. He said, we got no white guys there in that part of the world. Are you sure they're white guys? I said, bah! And I descended so I could get a closer look. And I came down maybe 300 feet or something above them, and I flew around them, and I was about to scream, of course but what the hell does it matter? And then Flip and I sorted this out. And then Flip said, Loot, they're black guys, but their skins are burnt off.
Sure.
That's that horrible thing. It can never ever be glorified. War. That's what it does. That's that terrible shit.
Steve, terrible. We're making light of a lot of things, but that is actually war. It's such a dreadful, dreadful thing. and nobody can ever, you cannot justify it. Now, after this, this is the last item before we have our break, is that you went home after 3 months of ops, and you arrived at the aankomstsaal at Waterkloof.
And I was met by my mom and my dad. And I mean, you know, the sun's hot up there. We would use brake fluid as suntan lotion. We drank a cartload of gin and tonic. They would fly gin and tonic to us when we were busy with ops on the other side, sometimes deep inside Angola. Pumas would fly us gin and tonic and ice cubes and Angostura bitters to mix with it. Okay. But the effect of that, when you have too much of it, makes the little veins in your cheeks burst. And the sun's, you know, having a pretty fair skin. I was on the golf course today. I don't booze. Okay. My cheeks were all ruddy, and my hair was quite long. 3 months, my hair grew like a wire. It was bleached blonde, blonder than normal. And I came into the arrivals hall, and I saw my mum and dad in front of me, and I looked at them, I smiled at them, and they looked past me. And I walked up to them, and they walked past me. And I watched them go, and then they looked, and there was nobody else coming off the aircraft. They turned around, their faces were like devastated, and they looked at me again, walked past me. And when they went past the second, I said, "Mom, Dad," and my mother just, I remember this look on her. She turned, Jesus. What have they done to you? What have they done to you? Turned to my father, "What have they done?" And my dad said to me, "We better get it out of here, there's going to be shit." And off we went, yeah. And I remember on the way, all the way then out to the farm, she just kept on looking at me. She kept on looking at me, and she would look, and then her mouth would open. She went on. And then she kept on, "Just look at me."
And I think that's a good point to stop for a half time. We'll give you 20 minutes, and yeah, that'll tell you. In 20 minutes' time, if you could come back there, please. Moving swiftly forward, as Bruce would say, that Steve took a holiday into Europe on a skiing holiday, and certain hostilities were expressed against him. Over to you, Steve.
Yeah, at the end of my first tour was a 3-month tour in Ondanks, and I was a tad wild when I came back from that.
Sounds like the gym manufacturers were making good bucks out of you.
Yes, but there was more than that. And I in my normal kind of, I suppose, part of my personality was just get the hell out of here. Get as far away from it as what you can. And there was a girl that I knew who worked in a travel agency, and I'd given her my passport and told her how long I'd be up there and how much money I'd had when I came back, and she had to organise my visas and my trip. And I got back on a Thursday, and on Saturday night I climbed on board a British Airways 747 and I flew to London.
You're lucky you got there.
I got to London and I joined an international tour. I was the only South African on the tour. And we spent about 4 or 5 days in London, went on to Munich for a drunken 2 days. I think it was 2 days. And they pulled us onto a bus and took us into Austria, into a place called Neustift, at the Joubert Glacier, or below the Joubert Glacier, Joubert Valley.
Been there?
The Joubert town, you've been there? Okay. And and I spent 2.5 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks there, having just an absolute ball, and meeting some really amazing people. And and one of whom happened to be a Dutch girl, and her name was Attie Hofstra. And Attie, unbeknown to me at the time, Attie was very heavily involved with Amnesty International. And they, I don't know how many people were there. I don't know how it all worked out. But when I flew on from after Austria, I went to Holland, where she picked me up at the airport, and I spent about 3 or 4 days in Holland with her. And a lot of wheels had been put in motion between her leaving Austria about 5 days or so before I did, and me arriving in Amsterdam. And the Amnesty International were looking for a poster boy, and I seemed to fit the bill.
Just on Attie, who looks, you said she was pleasing on a tired eye.
I was standing with a crowd of people in a little square outside my hotel, this little village in Uishta, and we were waiting for the bus to take us up to the glacier. And there must have been, I would guess, probably 20 people, 25 people waiting for this bus, and they got no bloody manners there. And the bus pulled up, and everybody rushed the bus. And I happened to be kind of in the front, carried, like in the front, and I took my skis and I stuck my skis and stopped everybody. And I, in my very best German, I'd been there all of 2 days, so it meant that I could speak German. And I said, "Halten Sie!" And they all stopped, and I said, "Alten Damen," I want to say old ladies first. So I went, "Alten Damen, hier stop." And I let the older woman on, and then I said, and I want to say, now the young ladies, I said, "Nun den jungen Frauen." and probably 7 or 8 very pretty girls in ski suits and everything climbed on the bus, but the last of them,
They look so cuddly in that.
the last of them was Jackie Bissett. Jackie Bissett, who I'd been in love with since she had said to Dean Martin in the cabin of the aircraft, the movie Airport, the original Airport, when she said to him, "But I've got a bun in the oven." I'd been in love with her since then. And anyway, here was Jackie Bissett getting onto the bus in front of me, or her identical twin sister. And it ended up, it was neither, but it was this, she had the most gorgeous you've ever seen. And I was,
Personalities.
and she was the only one who turned around and at the top of the stairs and said, "Well, thank you, sir. Thank you so very, very much," in this voice that just goes, and I didn't, I think I banged my shins probably 4 times on the stairs going up. But I followed her. I followed her at what I imagined to be a very discreet distance, and then she stopped and I bumped into her. And then she was momentarily quite irritated, and then she looked at me, sort of me, and she said, "Sit down." And anyway, we are friends. Well, we became very good friends. And when I ended up getting to Holland a few weeks later, she was at the airport waiting for me, and they tried to recruit me into deserting the South African Air Force, becoming poster boy. I must though tell you about the day after she left Austria. I don't know if any of you here know of a ex-SAAF chopper pilot by the name of Gary Hamilton. Hammers was a very, very naughty bugger. And he was in PE, so I didn't know him. I'd kind of overlapped, a tour of ours, I think it overlapped in the sticks. He'd come up for maybe a month, and maybe he was there 2 days or something, and then left on a up in, I'm talking about up there on Danks. And so here I was, as far away from the war as what could be, in this beautiful little Austrian town called Neustift. And our tour leader announced that there was a group of South African travel agents coming through the town, and that wanted to meet with us and talk to us about the tour that we want, because they would come home and promote the tour. And there was a little cocktail party that was kind of arranged for this lot.
You can see what's going to happen here.
And into this thing walked a very, 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 very beautiful girl. She had this auburn hair, gorgeous eyes. Anyway.
Were there any ugly ones?
Not that I saw. Anyway, very quickly she and I struck up conversation, and it really became a very intense conversation, very close. It's very close to each other, and we were talking. And after quite a while, in the background, I heard the tour leader grab a microphone, and he said, "I'm going to introduce the people on the tour to the travel agents, and you can have a chat with them." And he said, "And there's Diane. She's a secretary from Montreal in Canada. Hello, Diane. Hello." And that is Peter. He's an attorney from Adelaide in Australia. "Hello, Peter. How's it, mate?" And he went on, and I heard this in the background, and he said, "And they're from your own country, folks. The sole South African on our tour, that there is Steve Joubert, and he's a South African Air Force helicopter pilot." He was from, the tour leader was from Rhodesia. He said, "He's a South African Air Force helicopter pilot." And this girl, who was just far away from me, suddenly jumped back as if she'd been punched. She jumped back at least 3 or 4 meters. She jumped back, she said, "You know what?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "You know what?" And the tour leader said, "He's a South African everybody was shocked. "He's a South African Air Force helicopter pilot." She said, "You're a chopper pilot." I said, "Yeah." She said, "Do you know Gary Hamilton?" I said, "Our tours overlapped. You know, he's one of..." She said, "You bastards are all the same." Turned around and walked away. She would talk to me. Her friends were gathered around her, and they look at me like this. I couldn't get a word in edgeways. They were in town for 2 days. Nobody would talk to me. I got back, I phoned Hammers. I said, "Hammers, listen, you cocked up my flipping restaurant up. This could have been the woman of my dreams." He said, and I told him what happened. He said, "What was her name?" I said, "Never got the chance to find out." And he said, "What does she look like?" So I said, and he said, that may have been Lynn. She doesn't send me doesn't send me Christmas cards. 12,000 miles away from here.
You know, she probably said, you said, did he hurt? He said, "Did he hurt? He didn't write, he didn't vote." No, that's not.
Anyway, and then when I went to Holland, she picked me up at the airport. And it was arranged. It was quite staged. That the people that I met, nobody was hostile. There was nothing untoward. The most hostile person, I think it was it may have been my last night there, second last night there. I was taken to a Russian bar. I was a 20-year-old little half Dutchman from South Africa, you know. And I was, the Russians were like, they were the bad ones. The whole world was everything bad in the world was Russian. And she took me into this Russian pub in Rotterdam. And I sat down at this table, we had loopy food, and then the biggest oak I've ever seen in my life. The oak was big. He had a medallion on a gold chain on his neck that was the size of a small African country. and this I was so intimidating. His shirt was open to his belly button, and it was like he had like a bear skin, not bear skin, B-E-A-R, not B-A-R-E. And he was so intimidating. He sat down in front of me, and this oak had a go at me. He had a fat go, and he said to me, "Why you kill my colleagues?" What? He said, "I know you are South African Air Force helicopter pilot. Why you kill my colleagues?" I said, "I do nothing of the sort." He said, "We have every name of every pilot in South African Air Force." I said, "Well, I'm thinking about giving up." He just didn't. I've never been so intimidated, but I couldn't run away because my legs were shaking so bad, and there was no way I could get out of it. Anyway, we ended up drinking until the early hours. Man, Amos, I could drink. He could drink. I was carried out of there finally, and in fact, I think that I finally gave up. After a while, I gave up. I thought, these oaks are going to abduct me now, and they could have put me in a gulag, Antonov, and send me to a gulag. So, in Siberia somewhere. And but he was really intimidating. But they wanted me to basically go in front of the press and condemn what was happening here. And I was somewhat conflicted. I don't know if I really would have gone through with it, even in the best of circumstances. But my initial statement of concern was that I was concerned I had no money left. And Ati kept on saying, "But you're going to hand yourself over to the Dutch Interior Ministry and request asylum. They'll give you asylum. We'll back you, and they'll give you asylum." And he said, "But I've got no money." She ran at one stage ran into a bank, and she came out with a bunch of money and started putting it in all my pockets.
Your ticket.
Huh?
Your ticket.
Yeah. Now that was the morning. That was the last morning, and I'd made a flippant statement to her when I woke up, something about if I could change my return ticket to South Africa into cash, then I would have my own cash, and then I might stay. But British Airways were not interested at all, fortunately. And then she went mad at me. She said, "You don't need money, and you don't need a place to stay. We will organise your job. You'll fly helicopters into the North Sea oil rigs, and we will look after you. But you must go in front of the press and you must condemn what was happening in South Africa." And I finally sat her down and I said, "Look, my mother was a very senior manager at the CSIR. My father, most of his mates were Air Force and Army chaps. My brother was doing his national service, and my sister was engaged to a deputy South African ambassador in Brussels. And there would have been, the fallout would have been, for them, would have been horrific. And so I said, "No, I'll come home. And I'll fix up and then I'll come back." And we finally left it at that. And she, when I didn't go back too quickly, she wanted to come out, but she was prevented from doing so by she could never get a visa for South Africa. And then my security clearance was like reduced to nothing, to I think restricted, which is like the lowest category that there was, and without any explanation. And finally, she and I just kind of lost contact, and that was it. It was just an incredibly pleasant memory of an amazing time. And in October last year, one Sunday evening, my phone bleeped, and she had come across my book, and we've been in contact again. She's had the most incredibly terrible things that have happened to her subsequent to that. But yeah, it was an amazing time.
Steve, I think on a lighter note, I'd like people to hear about incident with Smithsdrift. Oh, hang on, this is still very serious stuff. But let's carry on with the Smithsdrift story, and then we'll come to Lighter.
Look, Smithsdrift was a weapons test range to the west of Kimberley, Douglas Way, past, kind of between Kimberley and Douglas out to the west. And I had a fly down there. I think they were testing the G5 cannon, and I was briefed to fly down there and fly the OPs out and do a fair amount of that kind of work with it. And I'd had lunch with my folks. I'd had lunch with my folks that day, an early lunch, because I had to rush off and go fly. And my folks had gone through a very, very hard time leading up to that lunch, but they'd managed to put the bad stuff behind them, and it was just the most amazing lunch I can ever remember. And I flew off to Smithsdrift, ran away from the lunch at about 1:30, and got on an aeroplane, went down to Smithsdrift. And that night, late that night, I was called, and there was a phone call for me, and it was a terrible line, kept on breaking up, but it was a chap from Air Force headquarters saying that I should come back as soon as that first light the next morning. That's something had happened to my mom. And then the call broke, and we couldn't establish contact again. And finally, at about 2 o'clock in the morning, I don't know if it's like what it's like in Civvy Street, but in the Air Force we were not allowed to fly allos unless there was I think it was a half moon. There had to be a half moon for you to fly them at night, because we've got very basic instrumentation. And it was moonless night, as luck would have it. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke my flight engineer up, and I said, I'm going now. And I'll fly alone, because it's not going to be, but I can't stay here. And he said, to his eternal credit, a guy called Johnny Smith, he said, bugger it, I'm coming with you. And I landed, we managed to get back to Swatties for about 6:45 in the morning, and I managed to make contact with the family, and my mum was in hospital, and I managed to get to see her in hospital. She had a massive stroke. She was 45 years old. She had a massive stroke. She was in a very bad way, and it was very. You used to blood and guts and screaming and agony, but there wasn't any blood and guts and agony and screaming. She was just lying there in a coma. Anyway, it was very. I couldn't handle it, so I ran away. I ran across Pretoria, and I was finally picked up by my girlfriend at that stage. And 4 days later, that embolism that had caused the original stroke moved, and my mom died. And I was 21, and it just became.
Your head messed up.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. You went back to Ondangwa, and you had to go from Ondangs to Windhoek in a DC-3.
A guy called Tinus van Rensburg was shot down, and his flight engineer's name was Koos, I think. Koos was killed. They were shot down about 80, 90 kilometers into Angola. And Tinus managed to walk out. He walked about 70 kilometers in the night with a broken back. I was, at that stage, I was doing a 2-week tour in Windhoek, which was really just we used to land in Windhoek, fill the aircraft up, and then fly out to Swakopmund and flip people up and down the beach in Swakopmund. So it was quite a gas, that kind of trip. And but I barely landed, and they put me on I think a little Queen Air, and flew me up to Undangs to take over from Tinnis, me and my flight engineer. Flight engineer was permanently based in Winterd. His name was Do Koon. And when the ops finally ended, about 10 days later, I had to fly back to Winterd to pack my stuff up to be able to go home. And the only lift I could get was on a deck. Now, in those days, they would regularly fly, and this was kind of late in the year, November, December, they would regularly fly teachers from high schools here, teachers of standard 9s and matrics. They would fly them up to the bush so that they could have a look at what the conditions were like, and they could come back and brief the young boys that were going to go do their national service in the next year to 18 months or so. And it was just such a deck that had about 16 of these teachers on board, and they'd been started at Mapache, and they'd gone from Mapache, they'd gone to Rindu, and now flown on to Undangs. And they had, oopsie, this thing is gone again. They had the biggest pile of beer I've seen for a long time, under a cargo net. It was a line deck with the seats up the side. And they had all this beer under the cargo net, but it was also like in the mid-40s. It's very, very hot, indeed. And there was no room for Doe and I to sit in the cart. So we sat right at the back in front of where the door was, and the Louis at the back of the deck, just on the floor. And we were drinking beer and stuff. And we got airborne, and it was you flew low level until a B Kirklandtown, and then the skipper, I think, was Trevor Watkins. And then Trevor was going to climb, and we got a winter climb. Yeah, and we were going along. And about half an hour out of Undangs, I looked at these oaks. None of them were drinking anymore. They were sitting there, and they kind of, it's like a pale green, and they were perspiring. And this kite was thumping around the place. And I looked at Doe, and I leaned across, and I'd read a book called The Great Santini, about Navy pilots in the US Navy. And there was a story in it. It said, Doe, this is what we're going to do. Okay, so he said, okay, back up. And I got up, and I staggered towards the front, up towards the door, the little doorway going into the cockpit, the forward bulkhead there. On that bulkhead was sick bags. They were in like 2 clips on either side. And I staggered up there. I put a beer in my flying overall in the top pocket, and I zipped it up. And I staggered up, but as I was staggering up, I was saying to these like, folks, I fly every day, and I'm feeling. And I finally ran up, grabbed the door going up to the cockpit, opened it up, grabbed a sick bag, and I stuck my head and shoulders into the door, and all they could see was this pilot, this pilot, and this pilot's whole shoulders were hunching on. And I'd taken the beer, I poured the beer into the bag, and then I put the beer can I put on the navigator's table, and I turned around, and these oaks now, their eyes were big like this. And I said, Oaks, I'm sorry, man. But I fly every day, and this banging around, he's going to do nothing for you. And they were looking at me, even the pilot's getting sick now. And the next thing, Do Koon shouted from the back there, hey, Luke, yes, you can't waste good beer. Ran up, grabbed it. There was one oak that I can remember, suddenly his cheeks just like, and opposite him there was a fellow sitting, and a stream of stuff shot, and this other oak was ducking it. They were getting sick into their bush hats. One of the guys had bought those bigger Vambo drums.
You know, you mentioned Arthur Walker. We interviewed Arthur Walker here, and he was a legendary fellow, we understood. And he'd done all kinds of things, but he was a loner. And that had a particular bearing on you guys and your operations.
Yeah, no. Arthur went to look for shit. He was that way inclined. He would, if there was nothing happening, Arthur would make something happen. He'd go find a hornet's nest somewhere and go and stir it up. And there were 8 of us over a target one day. It was, I would guess, again, it was probably 80 to 100 k's into Angola, and it was a big camp that we'd hit, and we were orbiting. There were 2 to the north, 2 to the east, 2 to the south, 2 to the west. Arthur and a guy called Peter Hines. Peter was brand spanking new up there on choppers. He'd done a 3-year tour on pigs, on maritime aircraft, and this was his first tour on choppers, on Alouette. And he'd drawn the short straw being Arthur's wingman, because that could be exciting. And Arthur drifted off somewhere to go and find a hornet's nest. And Peter was orbiting a grassland. It was a shano, but the grass had grown, there wasn't water in it. But that's where the pumas were coming into land. That's where the troops are going to be dropped. And we were looking. There was supposed to be like 800 people in this camp, 800 soldiers swept in this camp, and we couldn't find them. I think that they were all underground. Later, got quite good reason to believe that. But and so we were all chattering on the radio, saying, "What the hell happened to these oaks? An hour and a half ago, there were 800 people in this camp. Where have they gone to?" And Peter was on the side. He wasn't joining in. He was just going round and round in circles over this little shano. The next thing, he breaks into the radio and he goes, "Chaps, I'm drawing fire from 3 14-5 anti-aircraft guns. Could somebody please come across and help me?" You don't talk like that when oaks are shooting your arse. There's no ways you can talk like that. So my immediate thoughts was, there's something burning on the ground, some sparks flying in the air, and he thinks he's being shot at. And about 20 seconds goes by, we didn't acknowledge him. About 20 seconds goes by and he goes, "Guys, I've taken out the 3 guns now, but can somebody please come across and help me? I want to show them where the guns are." Yeah, you don't talk like that. You're taking out 3 anti-aircraft guns, but you're going to shout about it. You're going to shout big time about it. Peter, that's his good. He was announcing the under 16D team's netball score. That kind of comments. And then he came on about 10 seconds later, and he quite exasperated. He said, "Guys, would somebody please come across here? I've now got he had a micro pump warning light, caution light had come on his dash, and he yellow light, not even a red light, yellow light, and come on and he said, "I've got a micro pump warning light that's come on, and I'm going to go off to the Hague, to the helicopter, like kind of staging and refueling area, rearming area, which is about 10 k's away." So I said, "Okay, Peter." And by the time I got there, he was disappearing. I could see him disappear down onto the trees, and off he went. And I looked down into this shana where the pumas were about to come into land. And I looked, and there were 3. They would put them in a triangular arrangement, about 10 meters apart. These 14-5s, the Russian version of a 5.0. And there were the 3 guns, and around them were these oaks lying. Peter had shot them out. Or his engineer had a guy called Flippy Rowe. And they shot these guys out. The guns. I said, "Geez, guys, you've got to come across and have a look at this thing." Peter's talking. They were waiting for the pumas to come in. They would have blasted the pumas out of the sky. Okay, Arthur was off on his little jaunt. On his jaunt. Sorry. I then sort of ran low on fuel, so I went to the Hague to go and refuel. When I got there, as I landed, Peter's chopper was on the ground, and it just looked, after the fireball, it was just shining.
He's Arthur now.
It was shining, and like it was wet. And I got out and I walked around, and there, Peter and Flippy Rome, his engineer, was sitting on the grass next to the chopper, just looking at they had the left-hand luggage door open, and there were these dirty, great flipping holes. The one had gone through the bottom of the tank. It's a self-sealing tank, but when the thing was bigger than about that, it didn't seal. And it had gone through, the round had gone through, had hit, I don't know if it's a float mechanism that does your fuel level in the alloy, but it jammed whatever it was into the full position. This bullet had hit it. Another bullet had gone through, and the tank is held off the control cables, the tail rotor or the tail control cables by two stays on the side. This round had gone through the stays, knocked them both out, and the tank had fallen down onto the cables, onto his rotor cables. But because the fuel was draining out so fast, it got light, and so it didn't jam his cables. And as he was coming into the harbour, his engine cut. So he put it down onto the deck. And here was this aircraft just covered from front to back, just with this fuel.
Close.
That was close enough.
You had to take a colonel, an army colonel or general to Amsterdam in a Mpumalanga.
Yeah. General Hanekom. He's called General H in the book, by the way. But that's because I didn't know if it was Holtzhausen or Hanekom until Holtzhausen, after 30 years, awarded me my medals a few years ago, and it wasn't the oak that I had problems with. So in the book, the H is actually Hanekom. General Hanekom was an army general, and he was a bit of a bedonerd, as far as I later found out. But I was tasked to pick him up in an alloy at Swartkops Movement Control, Air Force Base Swartkops, and fly him to Amsterdam in the Natal part of the Transvaal to attend a parade. He was like the main boss man for them. He was going to be the officer commanding of this parade, and then I was to fly him back same day. Simple. It wasn't so simple, because when we landed, he charged me under 14 counts of the military discipline code. There were, of the 14 counts, I think 3 were for AWOL. There was malicious damage to state property, a few. There was disobeying lawful commands, a few of them, and insubordination counted for the rest. But it's quite a long story, but when I landed in the morning, it was a frightfully cold morning. It was probably the coldest morning we've had in this part of the world for many years. And the Met office had given me a Met report saying that it would be like the brass monkeys were doing this. That's how cold it was. It was colder than a witch's heart. And
heart.
and I landed at Movement Control, and he, unbeknown to me, had been waiting over an hour. Somebody had got the takeoff times screwed up. And he then came rushing towards the aircraft, into the danger zone of the aircraft. You don't, you guys know the chopper pilots, no, you don't walk under blades when they're slowing down and shit, but he did that. And so I stuck my hand up, this kind of action, telling him to get the hell back, saving his life. That was insubordination, charge number 1. And the fact that I was late for the takeoff time, he wanted earlier takeoff time, that was an AWOL charge. And then we got into the aircraft, and I was warm as toast. I had thermal underwear on, I had a lacquer flying jacket on, I was warm as toast. He was in his military step-outs, and the temperature was -4, and it was raining, and the Alouette's not the most leak-proof aircraft on earth, so he was getting wet and cold. Had an aide with him too. And so he told me to put the heater on. And the heaters of all the aircraft at 17 Squadron were not connected. The ones in Bloemfontein were, because it was colder there. But at 17 Squadron, the heaters were never connected. It was a bleed off the hot air off the engine. And he told me to put the heater on. And I said to him, the heater doesn't work on this aircraft. And he said, I can see the fucking control. Put the heater on. I said, General, and he's sitting in the back seat. I said, General, the heaters are not connected on these aircraft. And he leant up to grab the heater control and pulled it on, which I then turned and said, if you touch what controls my aircraft, I'm going to land this aircraft, you're going to have to get off. General, sir. But he pulled the flipping thing on and the bloody aircraft heated up. It was the one aircraft that's so that then became insubordination number 2, so you're disobeying a lawful command. And then the bloody rain on his thing became malicious damage to state property. Anyway, we get to Amsterdam, and I'm about 6 down at the stage. 6 low, boy, I'm already down there. And off he goes off on to go and attend his parade. There were like 10,000 people that were coming into the rugby stadium in Amsterdam for this parade, and he was going to be the main man, and he was going to give them words of wisdom that these folks would never forget. So I was parked at the base, and I had a bright idea just before lunchtime. And I said to his aide at lunch, I said, why don't, rather than waiting for the general to come back to the base, all the way back to the base after the parade, why don't I pick him up off the parade ground, off the rugby fields, camping in the rugby field. I'd land right in front of the dice, the saluting dice, and he just has to get in there and we come straight away. He said, no, that sounds a good idea, I'll have a chat with General. Came back and he said, General thinks that that's a good idea. So I said, okay, lekker. So they went off to the parade. I then was determined, I was not going to risk, Amsterdam's got lots of little hills around it. I was not going to risk flying over this flipping parade while this general was busy with his truck. So I called a young corporal or something there, and I said to him, listen, which direction, tell me where the rugby stadium is. He said, it's like that. Like that. That. I said, are you sure? He said, Lieutenant, I grew big here by Amsterdam. It's that. So I thought, okay, lekker. I'm going to fly there. And I'm going to fly, and I'm going to fly up, and I'm going to... I couldn't establish radio contact where the parade was going on. Their radios didn't work. So I thought, I'm going to go fly, I'm going to land on top of one of these gommels, these hills, and then I'll look down and I can see when the parade's coming to a close and stuff, and then I'll fly down, I'll pick him up with the parade. Sounds good. So I took off and I flew there. Not there, there. 90 degrees away. And we're flying T-top level, cruising along, looking for girls, looking for lekker things on Earth. 10,000 people were looking up. And I'm flying not much higher than this roof. And there's a saluting dice, and on this dice is this general. But the mooring does not describe it. This oak's mouth was open so wide. That rage in his eyes was something else. Right in the middle of his speech. I fly over his head. What makes it worse is that I then flew and I climbed up a hill and I went and landed on a hill. Knew we were in the cock. I mean, my engineer, he said to me, I think we're in the ship. I said, you're understating things again. But we go and land on the Gommel. My brother, who was supposed to be here tonight, but my brother was actually doing his national service in Amsterdam at the time. And he says that what made the general more than mooring than anything else, it was me flying over his head, but then when I went and sat on the Gommel at the top, everybody in the flipping stadium, instead of listening to him, looking at my chopper sitting on top of it, and that made him the bully. Because now his words of wisdom went nowhere. Anyway, I finally saw that the parade was coming to an end, that whole flipping thing, and they all went and they saluted and they did whatever they all wanted. And I started up and I came hurtling down the mountain. But chopper, like everybody knows, also you landed into wind, and I had to turn into wind coming into the stadium. And that meant that at 10 feet above the ground, I flew over all the troops who were marching off the ground. And this was winter. And it was Amsterdam. And it was a rugby stadium, and it had kikuyu grass and a fine red dust. And absolute chaos reigned because the troops, they blew their berets all over the place. I couldn't see each other. The whole parade fell into absolute mess. I did an almost IF landing in front of the house. And really, I think it was a flipping good landing. and I knew you could stop. And as this cloud of dust started to just emerging through it was the picture of the Muri. There was, you couldn't even see the oaks. You know we called it scrambled eggs that these oaks had on the epaulets and on their caps. It was gone. It was just uniform red, except for his glasses. And his mouth was open, his teeth were red from it. And his hands were out like this. I jumped in the chopper and he grabbed me in the throat. He started to squeeze my throat. I don't know how it happened, but I ended with it was a number 2 spanner. And I said, if you didn't leave me alone, I'm going to hit you with a stick. Sir. I think I did use sir. It was maybe spelled C-U-R at that point. But, and then his aide pulled him off. But when his aide pulled him off, his aide started to laugh. And he started to laugh, and I started to laugh. And then I started to roar. So I pulled the visor down and I pulled my flying jacket up all the way like this. So I had the visor down, but my shoulders got and we flew back to Pretoria. And he charged me under 14 counts of the military discipline code.
Okay, now a lousy thing with the at Itale, where the young major came in, and there was some of the opposition.
We were landing. It was the old Itali base. They'd abandoned the new Itali base at a point, and we were landing early in the morning, probably 6 o'clock in the morning. We were landing there. Some guys were on the other side, and we land there, stand by to go support some of our troops that were on the other side. And as we switched off, I got out the aircraft. We heard mortars and rifle fire and RPG-7s going off and shit. So it was close by, only about 1.5 kilometers away. That a cavalry patrol of ours, guys on horses, had been ambushed by a very, very aggressive group of terrorists. We encountered them a few times over the next few weeks, but they killed 2 of our guys. But because we heard it, we were back in the choppers and probably airborne, less than a minute later. So we got to the scene of the fight when the oaks were still all there. They were still in the bush and stuff. And there were about 100 tours in the group, and most of them went north. They always bomb shot in a situation like that. The moment the choppers arrived, they would bomb shot. But about 30 of them came south. But in doing so, they trapped themselves in some bush surrounded by these shonts, these pans that I spoke about earlier on. It was probably 5 kilometers long and about 2 kilometers wide, but they were trapped in it. So we brought troops in to sweep through it as we the choppers then flew in front of the troops and literally flushed these oaks out. And it was and it was we fought all day, probably till 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was the only break I was getting was when you were going back to refuel and rearm. And then it was back out into the fight, and they weren't they were fighting back, and but they were on the receiving end of a terrible beating, and finally at about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the fight was over, and I went back to Italy and landed, and it was, they said, the chaps there said, go and get something to eat and something to drink. You've been in the air all the time. And I was walking with my engineer. I was walking to the mess in the old Italy base. And I passed, there was a hard stand where the Pumas were parked. There were 2 Pumas parked. And in front of them, on another piece of the hard stand, under a tree, were all the casualties of that had been laid out, and they had been put in body bags, and they were going to be about to be flown to Oshakati, where they would get identified, whatever they did with them. And it was, for me, was a very close encounter with that you didn't normally get that close to the consequences of what you've been doing. You know, you're firing a 20 mil from 600, 800 feet up in the sky. You don't get that close to but here it was, all these guys were in these body bags. And I'd always had, from the time I started to fly, I'd always had this, I wouldn't say a fear, but a phobia. It's something that would prick at my mind in the early hours of the morning when you lay there reliving everything of the day, everything that had happened. And it was that if I was ever shot down or killed up in the sticks, which there was a chance of it happening, that I wanted people to respect me, to not, you know, mutilate my body. And I felt that's what soldiers should do for soldiers. And so seeing these guys, and they were I wanted to maybe make sure that they were being decently and respectfully treated. And as I was looking at this lot, a young army major, maybe glasses, and blonde hair and glasses, and he marched a flight of troops up, 25, 30 troops, and he halted them next to where these guys were, and he started to scream at these dead SWAPO guys. Oopsie. And that got my goat up immediately. And I turned to say something to him, but before I could, he walked up and there was a leg sticking out of this body bag. It hadn't been closed properly. And he walked up and he aimed to kick this guy for why, I don't know. And he was screaming blue murder about these, calling them the terrible names, these dead troops. And something snapped in me, and so the next thing I knew, I had him. There was a concrete wall behind it, prefab wall, and I had him by his throat. I had him up against the wall by his throat, and I think I wanted to kill him. And they pulled me, and I walked away. And I don't know if he probably wanted to. Yeah. He probably wanted to make something of it, but I think wiser heads prevail. But it's that kind of thing that, you know, that's what happens. It's part and parcel of what you.
Okay, Steve, the fact that you guys were not permitted to discuss the events with each other, or with your families, your partner, whatever, that it builds up a stress in you known as post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Yeah, I think that PTS is a reality. I mean, it's been around since people went to war, I think. But it's a build-up. I think that individual events can have the effect of creating PTS, but it's a build-up in that kind of thing is a build-up. As the war escalated in terms of, I'm sure Mark will know as well, the weaponry that they used increased in sophistication dramatically from 1980 onwards. There were, I mean, worse and worse things were being used all the time, and where we had total air superiority in 1980, I think it was by 1984, it was gone. And that was just the escalation of the weaponry being brought in against us. And you know, it's one thing to go into a fight and you're obviously expecting the guys, like, you know, it's not child's play. It's not pop guns. It's stuff that is happening, and aircraft get hit and people get killed. That's part of it. Hopefully more of them than you and all that kind of crap. But it builds up, and things started to happen. There was a very nasty incident where a helicopter vaporized. I don't want to go into the details of that at all, but a helicopter vaporized. And it was hit by a missile fired 180 kilometers away. There were four choppers in an orbit around a camp, and the one vaporized. And after that, it literally, every time you got into the chopper and you climbed to fighting height, because you were always on the ground other than that, or on the treetops other than that. But you climbed up to fighting height 600, 800 feet off the ground. After that, it was, I could disappear here, at any second. So there was that continual tension. But I think in society at that stage, it was, we grew up with boys don't cry. Stop being a pansy. I'll give you something and you didn't talk about how you felt. I mean, men didn't do that. And then you went into an environment where you were barred from doing that. And that was, you signed an Official Secrets Act, and you were barred. You were told, don't do it. Not even to a professional psychologist were you allowed. You couldn't talk to your wife, you couldn't talk to your families. One of the biggest things, the biggest disconnects that I would have coming back home is everybody thought I was drinking cheap booze, smoking cheap cigarettes, and getting a tan all day. We were, but we were doing quite a bit more than that. But that's how everybody thought it was a holiday camp. And most of the people, I think, in their defense, most people who went up into that war zone, that's what their experience was. It's only a very, very small percentage of people that actually ever came face to face, got into the whole combat situation. But you would come back and there was nobody to talk to. I couldn't talk to my wife, I couldn't talk to my friends, I couldn't talk to my parents, I couldn't talk to a psychologist, I couldn't talk to anybody. Yeah, and it was I left the Air Force in 1985, and in 1990, my life was in the toilet. I couldn't hold down a relationship. I couldn't feel anything. Amazing things happened around me, and I had no feeling. These switches had been thrown that just cut off all feeling. I felt that I acted everything I did. I would act happy. And that was all a consequence of that. I'd act happy, or I'd act sad, or I'd act surprised. Whereas, in fact, you were just dead inside. And in 1990, I said, I'm not going to live my life like this. And I went to see a psychologist. And I said, you've got to help me through this. I know there's stuff going on in my head. My only bitch against the Air Force is that they chose me to do a job because I had a psychological profile of being able to do the job no matter what the circumstance was. When I said that no more, I'm out of this, I want out, they should have told me what had gone on and switched me on again. That's my one bitch. And I'm not going to make you and cry about it, but I went and I saw somebody about that. And writing the book was part of a lengthy process of living a normal life after that. Unfortunately, so many people haven't gone there.
Didn't know about it, don't know how to know about it.
Yeah, and it's not just them that are affected or in this prison, this emotional prison. It's their families are locked into the same prison with them. So I spend a fair amount of time now. I'm tied up to a network where we do a lot of work on, and we call it storytelling. We tell your stories. Guys, if you were there, if you told your stories, even, you don't have to write a book. This is my story. This is just it's my little story. It's not, it doesn't purport to be talk on behalf of anybody else but myself. But I'm saying people that have got, and we all know folks that are affected by this. Typically, there's a tremendous amount of violence in their homes, tremendous amount of alcoholism in the homes, a tremendous amount of family breakdown. And there are networks that can support these people today, that can give them the support and the counselling that they need, even though they're deep in now into their 60s, can give them the counselling that they need and get them to go through it, yeah.
Fantastic. Steve, that is absolutely wonderful. And could you how do you make a crust nowadays? Or try and make a crust?
Of all the things I've ever done in my life, I'm busy with the most amazing thing I've ever done. And I'm a bee farmer. I'm a bee farmer in Mozambique. I currently have about 1,500 hives dotted around a place called Kusika, about 400 kilometers north of Maputo. And we are producing the world's, not me saying it, the top lab in the world is in Germany, and they have confirmed, they say we are producing the world's best organic medical grade honey. That's what I do.
Steve, I wanted to read something from your book. Would you do that?
Steve, where do we buy this honey?
Germany.
It's unfortunately unlikely that we're going to be bringing too much of it into South Africa. It just that we don't have a big enough market here for it. Guys, just to kind of finish off here, I just want to read the epilogue. I'm sure if folks have got questions, I'm more than willing to answer them. But I just want to read the epilogue to my book. It's just 2 or 3 pages, and I think it kind of, I wrote it at the request of the publishers. I wrote it to kind of draw a lot of the loose ends that there were when, anytime you write a book like this. It goes like this. I said, I'm now 60 years old. After leaving the SAAF in 1985, I abandoned aviation as a career and focused on building businesses instead. The events described in this book happened almost 4 decades ago and naturally had a profound effect on my life. If I bear a grudge at all, it is against the military establishment, not for moulding me into the fighting man that I became for 10 years by intentionally placing me in situations that required me to close down emotionally in order to survive the experience, but rather because they blatantly shirked their responsibility to switch me back into a balanced, considerate and compassionate human being when my fighting days were over. It would have taken little for them to have done so, even if they had only acknowledged the possibility that so many of us young men and a handful of women had witnessed such untold horror that we required committed professional intervention to curtail further damage to ourselves and to those close to us in the ensuing years. For example, my first marriage ended in an acrimonious divorce within 5 years of me leaving the Air Force. Also on the casualty list were most of my close relationships that I forged over many years with friends and even family members, none of whom could understand or accept the random, cold rage and overt callousness that seemed to underpin far too many of my actions, my interactions, and my words. Looking back now, I think I was hell-bent on trying to escape the claustrophobia of normal life with any legal means at my disposal. It is highly destructive to live your life in a state of permanent escapism, a state in which one establishes only tenuous bonds with those around you, never extending those bonds to any emotional level or to even partial intimacy, keeping things on the surface, and it's unlikely that anyone will see the ugliness below, perhaps. The worst of it all is that all the time I felt I was the only person around who was struggling to readjust. It's just worsened the situation and made my withdrawal from those around me all the more complete. Knowing that something was very wrong and needed expert attention is one thing, but being legally barred from even approaching such experts was just plain cruelty. Even today, I know countless people who have really battled to adjust to life in South Africa after leaving the military, and many who are still in the fight. None of them sought the help that they also desperately needed, but were barred from seeking. Just recently, I had a meal with a close friend who was an ops medic from the same era. We have been friends for more than 10 years, and he has never once before talked about his experience. We were discussing my book when he suddenly began telling me of an incident involving a 9-year-old Ovambo girl who had been caught in the crossfire during a contact between the SAAF and SWAPO, and had sustained multiple mortal wounds over her entire little body. She had been airlifted by chopper, unconscious, from the battlefield to the surgical unit in which my friend and 15 other medical personnel were working. He recalled the terror in her eyes as she woke up in an alien environment surrounded by masked medicos in blood-stained scrubs with shiny instruments in their hands, noisy machines in the background, and the theatre lights glaring onto the operating table. 40 years after the event, my friend kept choking with emotion as he related the details of the tireless, round-the-clock effort of those medicos as they frantically battled with every bit of skill and each piece of modern science available to save her. But despite their actions, on the morning of the 4th day, she lost her final fight. Now these were men exposed to death and destruction and blood and guts and screaming and agony, but this particular incident profoundly affected them all. When she died, and without being asked, each of the medicos from the unit chose to help to wash and clean the lifeless body of the little girl. They then dressed her in a pretty green frock that they bought from a local dressmaker. My friend's final recollection is of the tiny little bow tied at her midriff, fluttering in the wind as her grandfather carried her off to bury her. Until the day he told me the story, the trauma had remained hidden in some dark recess somewhere in my friend's mind. It seemed to me that he, and so many like him, struggled to see that ridding themselves of the demons of the past is possible only by exposing those memories to the light. My choice, made roughly 5 years after I left the SAAF, was to throw caution to the wind and see a skilled and experienced clinical psychologist. I never did confirm whether he diagnosed me with PTS or not, but his intervention placed me firmly on a path to honestly confronting the dark stuff, and the resulting healing process reawoke my inherent but dormant compassion and empathy. Are all the ghosts of this period of my life buried? I'd like to think that they no longer dominate my life as they once did. It's become a lot easier to talk freely about most of these memories without my heart pounding too much and my chest tightening. But I also know that they will never fade completely. A major contributing factor in my normalization is that later I also married my very best friend. Her name is Diane, and she has never shied away when I felt the need to talk. This book is a continuation of that healing process. My story is but one of hundreds of thousands of stories in the minds of Southern African men of my generation, on all sides of the conflict. I urge anyone who reads this book to please tell his or own story, even if only to someone who cares enough to listen, because it's never, ever too late.
Wow. Sean? Steve, to me that was absolutely enthralling. And having read that book, it's an extremely emotional thing. And I feel what a wonderful thing of you being able to share that sort of love and your outlook and bring to notice the evil of war and the drama that you experienced. which so many others did and still haven't spoken about it. Thank you very much indeed. You want a speaker there?
Before you
Sure.
do this, you have to wear it.
Up there. So you can touch it.
Sorry, I just had to do that. I really enjoyed that. And on behalf of EAA, Karl, Mari, and all the individuals that have made this possible, just a token of appreciation from us
Thank you very, very
and
much.
something for the wall.
Thank you. It will go
Bring
into
out
a
fond
great
memories.
place of prominence. Thank you so very much.
And their pleasure.
Can you just hold it up?
Thanks, Steve. Steve, and also thank you for all the time that we spent together, and I'm sure we will get together. I don't have anything with rotary wings on it, but we'll go for a ride. So,
And hold that piece of the can.
Lose the packet, Michelle.
yeah, lose it. That was lovely.
Okay, so just put the cap
That
down.
way? This way?
Yeah, properly. Yeah. No, a little bit up, please. Just a little bit. That's perfect.
Don't hold your... Yeah, I thought.
And then the EAA thing, tip it down. No,
Tip it down that way.
Thank you. Sean,
I'll
put your
send you a
hand-
copy of this.
Sean,
What's that do with the mic?
Hold it. Hold it there, yeah.
Look, before we duck, would anybody like to ask Steve any questions?
Can I just mention something? I was reminded today that how you described the consequence of war and what happens out there and what goes through your mind is very, and I'm going to read it in your book as well. Incredible, thank you.
Thank you.